In the far corner of the old world, in a land where the winters were long and the summers gentle, there once stood a palace of cold stone and tall windows. It had watched over the valley for hundreds of years, its walls holding the footsteps of kings and queens whose names were written into the dust of history. Inside this palace, a king lived, a man unlike any other. His name was King Alaric. From the day he was born, people whispered about him. His body was thin, almost fragile, with shoulders that sloped as though the weight of the crown had pressed on him since birth. His face was long and narrow, with eyes that seemed too large for their sockets, and lips that curled in strange ways. When he spoke, his teeth were uneven, and his skin was pale as candle wax. His hair, though thick and carefully brushed, hung in heavy brown waves that framed his unusual features. To many, his appearance was unsettling. When he was a boy, the servants told each other that the child was bewitched, that some shadowy magic had marked him. They whispered these things in kitchens and hallways, thinking he could not hear. But Alaric always heard. He learned early to walk quietly and listen from behind doors, and so he grew up knowing how people saw him, not as a boy, not even as a prince, but as something strange, something to be feared. Yet, despite this, Alaric's heart was gentle. He loved music. He loved the scent of fresh bread. He loved walking alone in the gardens at dawn, where the dew clung to the grass like tiny pearls. But he did not love people, for they rarely loved him in return. When his father died, and the crown was placed upon his head, the whispers did not fade. They grew louder. This king was so deformed that he must be bewitched, the market folk would say. No natural man could look like that and still live. Alaric ruled quietly, avoiding the grand banquets and processions that his ancestors had enjoyed. He spent his days in his library, reading by the tall windows, the valley spread out below like a painted map. Still, ruling a kingdom was not so simple as hiding in its tallest tower. One year, the crops failed. A summer storm had torn through the valley, flattening the wheat and drowning the orchards. People went hungry. Mothers came to the palace gates with thin, quiet children in their arms. Alaric did what he could. He opened the royal storehouses, sent wagons of grain to the villages, and ordered the palace cooks to make soup for any who came to the gates. But each act of kindness seemed to twist into another rumor. He feeds us, so we will owe him our souls, they said. He is not merciful. He is luring us into his spell. These words weighed on him more than any crown. One late autumn afternoon, Alaric sat alone in the throne room. The light was fading, and the golden glow from the tall windows was slipping into shadow. He was staring at the tiled floor, lost in thought, when the sound of footsteps echoed through the great hall. It was Elias, a farmer from the western edge of the valley. Elias was broad-shouldered, his hands rough from years of work. His eyes, though wary, were honest. "My king," Elias said, bowing awkwardly, "I have come to thank you. My family would not have survived this year without your grain." Alaric lifted his gaze. "You have walked far to say these words." "I have," Elias replied, "because I know what they say about you, and I know it is not true." The king's breath caught, though he kept his face still. "What do they say?" "That you are cursed, that your kindness is only a trick, that you are not truly human." Elias shifted his weight. "But I have seen your mercy. I have felt your generosity. Whatever you look like, whatever people may think, I know you are a good man." Alaric sat very still. For a moment, he was unsure what to say. Finally, he spoke in a voice softer than the autumn wind. "You are the first to tell me so, Elias." From that day, the farmer visited often. He would bring small gifts from his land, a jar of honey, a basket of late apples, and sit with the king in the library. They would talk of the harvest, of the changing seasons, of old stories from the villages. Alaric found himself laughing again, though quietly, as though afraid the sound might break. Still, the kingdom's troubles were not over. Winter came early that year, with snow that buried the roads and froze the river. Supplies grew thin again, and fear spread through the villages. Some said the strange king had angered the gods. One night, a group of men came to the palace gates, carrying torches. They shouted for the king to show himself, to prove he was not a creature of darkness. The guards kept them back, but the sound of their voices carried into the stone halls. Elias came to the king that night. "You cannot hide. Forever, my friend," he said. "They need to see you, not from behind windows, not as a shadow in the distance. They need to see the man who has been feeding them." Alaric looked toward the fire. "And if they cannot see past my face?" "Then you will speak with your heart," Elias said, "and they will have no choice but to hear." The next morning, under a pale sky, Alaric stepped onto the palace balcony. Below, the square was crowded with villagers, their breath clouding in the cold air. He wore no crown, only a dark cloak against the wind. At first, there was a murmur, a ripple of surprise at the sight of him. His sharp features caught the winter light, and for a moment, the whispers rose. Then he began to speak. His voice was steady, carrying across the square. He told them of the grain that had been shared, of the soup given at the gates, of the efforts to keep them warm through the long winter. He spoke of his love for the valley, the sound of the river in spring, the way the wheat swayed in summer, the scent of apples in autumn. "I have been called cursed," he said. "I have been called less than a man. But I tell you this, my heart beats for this land and for those who live upon it. I will not turn away from you, no matter what you think of me." There was silence. Snow drifted down in slow, soft flakes, and then, from somewhere near the front, a single voice called, "Out! Long live the king!" It was Elias. Others began to join in, first uncertain, then stronger. "Long live the king! Long live the king!" Alaric stood there, the cold air biting at his skin, and for the first time in many years, the weight in his chest eased. The winter passed. The following spring was kind, with rains that fell softly and crops that rose green and strong. The fears of curses and witchcraft faded, replaced by stories of the king who had stood in the snow to speak for his people. Alaric did not become handsome, nor did the whispers of his strangeness vanish entirely. But now, when the villagers spoke of him, there was something new in their voices: respect. He continued to walk the gardens at dawn, still savoring the quiet moments. But now he was not always alone. Sometimes Elias walked with him, their footsteps, side by side, and though the king's reflection in the mirror had not changed, he no longer turned away from it so quickly. For he knew now that his worth was not measured in the smoothness of his features, but in the steadiness of his heart. In the years to come, they would remember King Alaric not for the shape of his face, but for the shape of his kindness, and the valley would flourish under the rule of the man they once feared and came to love.